Anyways, I'll just share it to the uh, group as well.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. Okay then. So, yesterday we worked on the first card, right? So we need to finish all of the other cards. So I mean, this would be pretty straightforward. So I'll just hit npm start. And by the way, if you guys use npm, I'll also talk about another package manager that is, better than npm in a lot of different ways. So if you if you guys like if you guys have already used yarn, then it's fine. That's what I was referring to. So yarn is basically another package manager that allows you to install your packages a little bit faster, and it handles a lot of error management behind the scenes. So I prefer yarn over using npm to install things, and to run my scripts as well.
After
Okay,
this
so
session, I mean, after we finish this part.
yeah, I mean, we can switch between yarn and npm anytime we wish to. So I'll just since this was a beginner session, I started with npm, but once we get into api calling and stuff, I'll switch over to yarn.
All right, then, sure.
Yeah. So before we start working on these the other five cards, I like what we talked about was separation of concerns, right? So currently our app is not actually separated into called true components, in terms of the css, because all of the css are basically dumped in a single place. And this is not a good practice in my in my opinion, because as your application size grows, this css will grow to thousands of lines in size, because already just with a single page it has 200 lines of css, right? So you would you should prefer to split your css into components as well. So the way we do it is by practice that is called css in js. So css in js basically means that you write your css inside your javascript itself. So these are your javascript files, so you write your css inside here itself. So one way of doing that is obviously using the style tag. And style tag in react is different from how style tag works on normal html, in terms of that in normal html we just give it a string, and inside the string we specify each of the styles in a single line, right? But style tag in react actually takes an object. So the first set of curly braces is to specify that we are gonna write JavaScript, and inside there I'm pasting I'm writing an object. So this object now accepts all the styles that you want to specify in the style tag. So for example, if I set the color, then that color will be applied to this particular component. Now obviously this style tag won't work on min max temp, because min max temp is a custom component, right? So we need to since this is a custom component, this property is also a custom property. So we need to specify how this property is going to be used inside the component, then only it will work. But in case of article tag, it will work flawlessly. So if I hit control space inside here, I'll see all of these different styles that you can apply. So I'll just to show you, I'll just apply a simple style over here, and you'll be able to see that the color changes to red. Okay. So this is obviously the easiest way, but we don't. I mean, no one recommends this, because again, inline styles are repetitive. So the way we do it is that there are these different libraries that you can use. One, few of those libraries I would like to mention is, first is Emotion. So Emotion is actually basically a group of libraries that are all actually separate libraries. Okay, so the library that I prefer to write CSS in JS is called Style Components. Okay, so this is basically this library basically provides you with a structure that enables you to write css inside your javascript. And and it basically works in the way that you specify which type of tag you want to style, and then you specify all the styles inside that particular tag. This is something called template literals. So you use the backtick symbol, the symbol that's on top of your tab button on the keyboard. So you specify all of your styles inside the a set of backticks, and that way you can also use variables inside the style if you want, using the dollar curly braces syntax over here. Okay, and what this gives you is a custom component. Okay, this custom component, this button variable basically holds an a tag that has all of these different styles. Okay, so this is the approach that style components takes. There are many different approaches. There's css modules as well. So if you want to, if you think that writing css inside javascript is not the way to go, you can write css in broken pieces called modules. So you'll basically name these files as for example, if I'm working on minmax temp, then in that case you'll create a css module for it called minmax.temp.module.css. Okay, and then you'll import it inside here like this. Import styles from dot slash, and you name the module min max temp dot module dot css. Okay, and once you do this, you can use like all of the classes that you define inside the css file. All of those classes can be accessed using styles dot and the basically the class name. So instead of using min max temp, I can use, put a curly braces and use styles dot min max temp like this, and this should obviously be a class inside here, and then only it will work. Okay, but for today we're going to use style components and basically split our css into separate into each of their components where they should belong. Okay, so I'll just undo all the changes. Save. All right. So in order to use style components, you need to first install it. So the way we install it is obviously using npm node package manager. So if you search for style components like this, you'll see that it is actually a package on the npm registry. This is the npm registry website where you can see the list of all the packages that you can install using npm. So you can basically install it using this command. Just copy it and paste it into a new terminal. So the first terminal is used to run the React application. So just create a new terminal and paste it into the terminal and hit enter. Now what will happen is that it will download that library from the npm registry, and it will basically paste all of that code inside the node modules folder. So once it completes, we'll be able to import the style components library or module into our component. There's also emotion that you can look into, and I introduced, like I'm just mentioning this library because there is a component library out there. So basically what we are doing is we are working with components right now. So what if you want to reuse components a lot? There must be some components that are tough to implement, and you would still want to use them or reuse them once you have made them. So you can turn them into component libraries. So one such popular component library is called Material UI. Okay, it is inspired by the Google Material UI design guidelines, and it contains a set of like a very huge set of components that you can use for free in your applications. So things like okay, let me choose something that is tough to implement on your own. So things like accordion, for example. So if you look at this, there's a snappy animation and stuff. So things like these can be like directly used from these libraries. So this library Material UI actually uses emotion now. It used to use something else earlier, but now it uses emotion to specify custom styles for its components. So if you want to customize these components that are provided by Material UI, you can do that. But for that, you need to use emotion. That's why I'm just mentioning this. Okay. All right. So I think style component is now installed. So we can just import it. And the way we import it is using the default import syntax. So we do it like import styled from styled components. Okay. Once we do it, we can start specifying, like start creating components. As I said, styled components basically give you styled components, right? Like it gives you components that contain the styles that you specify inside that particular definition. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll call this a card component, or I'll call it min max card component. Okay, min max card component, and it will be a styled dot, and here it's an article, right? So I'll also name it a style dot article, and you'll actually see that it shows you all the HTML tags that are like present out there. So it you can use any of these. So I'm just using article because that's what is being used here as well. Once I create this style and I copy paste all of the styles related to this min max card over here, I'll change this article, I'll replace this article with this min max card. So after this, you put two backticks, and inside here you can specify all the styles related to this article tag and everything inside this article tag. So this style components you not only uses CSS and not only supports CSS but also SCSS. Like yesterday, you might remember that I mentioned SCSS allows you to do stuff like nesting, and that way you don't have to repeat these selectors again and again. So all of that is supported by style components. That's another virtue that you get by using style components. So what I'll do is these are all the styles that are related to min-max temp, right? So inside the stats, we have the article, and the article was basically all the cards, right? So I'll copy these first of all into the min-max temp directly. So these would be basically these would be transferred to this article tag over here. So now I'll just replace this with this, and at the end also I'll see that if it's replaced or not, and it is. So now if I save it, you'll be able to see that card is now getting the styles not from the class, not from the CSS class, but from the style components. And we can verify that by looking at the class name. So the class name here is generated at random. I mean, it's not just generated at random. It has a particular algorithm behind the scenes that actually generates random names for the classes, so that there's no overlap between class names. And this basically tells you that yeah, this component is now getting styles from a style component. Okay, so this is your style component, and this is your component. That's the difference. Like it just holds the changed styles. So once you have styled the article, we can also style everything inside it by basically nesting those things inside this whole component. Okay, so not component, this whole styles. Okay, so we do that by, so as you can see, there's h2 inside min max temp, right? So I'll just copy this part alone and I'll paste it here. So now all of those h2s which are present inside this article tag would be styled. So if I save it, you'll see that the h2 is now styled properly. Similarly, I'll just copy each one of these. Okay. All right. And again, this span is inside this div, right? So what we can do is we can actually move this span to inside this div. There's like a multi-layered nesting here. So inside the article, you have h2 and div, and then inside the div, you have a span as well. Okay. Then we have the separator class. We can add that here as well. And then inside the separator, we have the HR. So we can add that inside the separator here. So you can see that the hierarchy now is much easier to read and much easier to understand. By just looking at it, I can say that yeah, this set of styles will basically style all the HR that are present inside the separator class. So I can just go down, look at the separator class, and I can see that yeah, only this HR will be styled by that property over at the top. And what this gives you is I can basically delete this whole thing and save it, and it will still work, because now everything, starting from the styles to the markup and even business logic, if we add any business logic over here, everything is contained in just one single file. And you can safely collapse this if you find that yeah, you don't want to, if you think that you don't want to see the style, so just collapse it. So now everything is contained in a single file. And if you want to reuse this component later on in some other project, just come over to this file, copy everything and paste it in the new project, and it will start working, provided that you're using style components over there as well. Okay. So let's just start working on the rest of the cards. I'll just open the Figma design. So I am guessing that you all have the link already, so I'll just keep it on my secondary monitor. All right, so let's start working on the wind status. That's the second card over here. All right, and it's a very simple card, so it won't take much time to implement. Let's see how we can work on it. Wind status, JSX, and I'll take a shortcut. I'll just copy this whole thing because it's very similar to the first component, and I'll paste it here. Then I'll start renaming things. First thing that I want to rename is the component itself. So it's called wind card. That's what I want to name it. So wind card, and it's also an article, and this component name should also change. So like if you want to change a variable declaration and all of its usages at the same time, you can hit F2 on your keyboard. So once you do that, it will allow you to change everything at once. So if I change it over here to wind status and hit enter, it will also change at the bottom here. And if it was used at multiple different places, all of those places will reflect this particular change. So now I'll just save it, and first of all use it over here in the start section, right? So I'll just add wind status, and if I go back to my page, you'll see that it's basically a replica of this component right now. So I'll just start changing things over here. So first thing that I want to change is the title, so I'll change it to wind status. And the second thing that I want to change is basically the text. So it should be something like 7.70, or I'll just do the props at the same time. So what I'll do is speed and direction, because that's the two things I want to show over here. And here we can use speed, and then at the bottom we can use direction, but we need to work on that first of all. So I'll just start working on it first. So if you look at the design, you'll find that there's a arrow and then a direction that is being shown, right? So I'm assuming that we are gonna get I'm assuming for this component that it will get the direction in degrees, okay? And then we need to figure out how we use this degrees value to calculate the to show that icon, and at the same time to show that particular text, that is west, southwest, or whatever you want to show over there. Okay, so I'll just remove this part as well, and here I need to add a span, and inside the span we'll have kilometer per hour. Okay, so now instead of using a div, I want to use let's see, I can use an h3, so I'll do that. And inside here, let's remove this part and this separator as well, because we don't need that anymore. And I'll use an h3, and font size should be let's see, 26 pp. And we are not sending that prop, that's why it's not showing up. So let's just do that now. We are going into starts and setting the speed prop to 7.70 and the direction to 135, that is in degrees. Okay, so now I'm getting the 7.7 over here. let's just change the font size, like let's just increase the font size a little bit more and a little bit more, and I'm happy with what this is, like how this is looking. Okay, let's just increase a little bit more. So now inside this h3, I have the span tag, right? So this span, and for this I want the font size to be 12 pt maybe. Let's see. 12 pt is a little too less in my opinion, so I'll increase that to 16 or maybe 18. Yeah, this looks good. All right. So after this, so this space is actually a little too much for me, so I'll just reduce that. And now it's looking good. All right. So moving on to the direction icon at the bottom. So so you can see that this is basically an icon that is going to be rotating based on the angle, right? So here we have two different options. We can either use multiple different icons, each for different degree values, or we can use CSS to apply some kind of rotation to that icon. So since I'm being lazy, I'll just first of all try to find some icons if they are present out there, and if they have multiple different angles, then we can directly use them based on the degree value. Okay. So for using icons in your project, if you don't have access to the SVGs that like we have in these designs, so if you don't have access to those, what we can do is we can use libraries for again we can use libraries for icons as well. So a very popular library for icons in React is React Icons, because this basically contains all the icon libraries out there. So it contains icons from Ant Design, Bootstrap, even Favicon, even Font Awesome is somewhere over here. Yeah, so there's Font Awesome, and there's many more that you haven't even heard of. So it's basically like an actual library of libraries. So or if over here I'll just search for something that might give me a result that I want. So searching for compass gives me this compass icon, but I don't really like it. Let's just see that if we can find something similar to what we have in the designs or not. So searching for drop. Okay, maybe needle. Okay, I'll just use the compass icon that I found. So we can use this compass icon. This is what I like, and this is what I think might look good over there. So I'll just use this compass icon. How we can use it is, first of all, we need to again install the library. So as I said, like you can use npm to install your libraries and all, but npm is a little slow. So why is it slow? It's because every time you do npm install, it downloads it from the npm registry. Okay, but there is something called yarn, which is also a package manager that is basically built as a replacement for npm. So what yarn does is, the first time it downloads any package, it also stores it on your computer at some place. So so that when the next time you're reusing or re-downloading that package for some other project, it will basically reuse that downloaded version that is stored on your computer already. So it takes a slightly like a lot less time compared to npm. So I'll actually switch to yarn now. So switching to yarn is actually fairly easy. All you need to do is remove this package log.json file, and first of all, you need to install yarn. So the way you do it is npm I dash g, and this dash g stands for global. So so far we've been installing libraries inside our project, right? So for that we were using npm I, but in case we want to install something that is gonna be used from anywhere on your system, like a script that is yarn, then in that case you use dash g to install it globally. So I write dash g and then I write yarn. So this will install the latest version of yarn for you. Mine was already installed, so it didn't take much time. So once you do that, you can see that yarn is actually installed on your system. So if you do yarn dash v, you'll see that yarn it gives you the version of yarn. So now you need to start working on your project again. So what you do is, in order to create something similar to that package log.json, you need to first write yarn. So it'll look at all the packages and it will create something called yarn.log, and this is basically identical, not identical, but the functionality is identical to what package log.json was for. So once it finishes, yeah, so once it's done, now we can use yarn in our project. So I'll basically install the React icons library, and the way we do that in yarn is using yarn add and then the name of the library. So I'll do yarn add react icons. This will give me the react icons, and you'll also see that in the package log, I mean package JSON. So now I can use that icon over here. So the way we use it is we import it using a named import. Whenever you use curly braces to import something, it's called a named import. And when you directly write a name over here, and this name can actually be anything, and the functionality won't change, then it's called a default import. But in case of named imports, you need to name that particular thing that you're importing specifically. Like, so that's what we're going to do now. So I'm importing something from React icons, and which package, like which library did it belong to? So it belonged to the initials, which is ri. So I'll write slash ri. Okay, and inside here I'll then paste that particular component name, and you'll be able to see that it's here. And there's also a bunch of different components, like all of these are basically the icons, but in the form of components. Okay, so I'll now go down here, and I need to show that over here, right? So I'll just paste it here, and let's see if it pops up or not. I need to refresh it, and yeah, it did pop up over here. So the size is a little too small because by default all of the sizes are 16. So I'll change the size by using the size property which comes with this library, and I'll change it to 24. And 24 looks good, but I'll still try 21 for once. Yeah, so 28 looks better. So this time around, obviously we can push this to the very bottom using display flex, and using margin top auto, right? We can do that, but okay, yeah, actually let's just do that. I was thinking of explaining you about absolute positioning, but let's just leave it for later. Okay, so yeah, so we need to push it to the bottom. So we need to apply display flex to this article. Okay, so we come over to the top, and here I'll write display flex and flex direction column, and align items stretch, which is actually the default, so we can leave this property out. Okay, now for this particular thing, for this particular icon, so if you look at the markup that it generates, it is basically an SVG. This icon in turn is basically an SVG. So what you can do is, inside the style component, you can style the SVG by giving it a margin top of auto. This will push it to the bottom, and this looks good. But obviously auto obviously we also have some text beside that particular SVG, so I'll also add that. So for that we need to change it, this and actually also wrap this inside a component. So this time I'll use another semantic tag name which is similar to a div tag, but again it just has a different name. So since this is at the bottom of the whole card, I'll name it footer. Footer is a semantic tag name. And then also I'll add a div which will hold that particular text. So for now, I'll just write WSW. We'll figure out later how to, change these different texts based on the direction. But for now, I'll just hard code it. Okay. So now we'll come over to the top and set footer's margin top to auto. So this is looking like this. Now I'll add display flex, and and this is not aligned to the center, so I'll use align item center. Okay, I'll also add a gap of 1 rem, One rim looks too much, looks like too much, so I'll just reduce it to 0.5. This is looking good now. And actually the colors and all is also looking like proper, so I'll just leave it at that. But I'll change the font weight for this because H3 has some bold has a little font weight, but I don't want that, so I'll just reset the font weight to 400. All right. So maybe for the span I'll reset it to 400, and but for this I'll change it to font weight of 500. Wait, were we using 600? Yeah, so now this is looking good. Okay, so now we need to figure out how to rotate this based on the direction. All right, so we can basically split the whole 360 degrees of range into 8 different directions, and we're gonna basically have a range, and based on the range we are going to figure out what direction we want. So let's just see how we can do that. So for the 8 directions, I'm gonna have. Okay, let's just think about it a little bit. So, what we can do? We can have a number, we can assign a number basically for each of the direction. Starting from east, let's just open paint for this. So, the directions that we want to represent are basically these 8 directions. Okay, so starting from east, we can have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right, and we can assign these numbers based on the degree value that we have. So let's just see how we can do that. We can write a simple switch case here, and before writing the switch case we can have that direction like value as a variable. So I'll call it let's just name it dir equals to, first of all I'll set it to 0, and then in the switch statement, actually this should not be a switch because we are talking about ranges, so this will actually be a if else like basically an if else loop, not a loop, an if else tree. So I'll write if direction is greater than 0 and less than, and direction is less than 45, okay, hold on. So let's see what we can do here. So anything that comes in between these two values, between 0 to 90, will belong to 1, and similarly for 3, 5, and 7. And if it is a 0 degree or 90 degree or 180 or 270, then it will be 0, 2, 4, or 6. Okay, so this should actually, the check should actually be for greater than 0 and less than 90. Okay, in that case we'll have the direction as dir equals to 1. Okay, else if, and we'll just keep on repeating this pattern. So else uh, if direction equals 90. Okay, and you know what I'll do is I'll just copy this multiple times. I'll write else over here once more, and then I'll just copy it multiple times. So this should be greater than 90 and less than 180, and I just paste it a bunch of times. So for equals to 90, we'll set it to dir equals to 2. Similarly, here I'll set it to dir equals to 3. For here, it should be equals 180, and there I'll set the dir to 4. Then here it should be greater than 180 or less than 270. In that case, I'll set the dir equals to 5. For equals to 270, I'll set it to dir equals to 6. Now, I know that this is not the best way to do it, but for now, it should work. Like you can think of a mathematical function using modulus operator that will actually give you this value basically directly from the direction value. But I'm just doing this like this for the sake of simplicity. So if dir equals to 6, this should be and this one should be 360. So here dir equals to 7. And lastly, if dir, in case dir is, or what we can do is, else in any other cases, we can set dir to 0. All right. So once we have like basically assigned the value of dir, we can use that to set the rotation for this particular SVG. So the way we do it is, what we can do is we can pass props to our styled component that we declared at the top. Okay, so I'll pass the prop dir, or I can name it anything I want. So I'll just name it direction equals to dir, and this will basically be a value from 0 to 7, right? So that's what this is. Okay, let's see what comes next. Okay, so so the we are passing the prop to the component. Then at the top we can extract that prop anywhere we want using a syntax that using the syntax that I showed you earlier in the documentation. So how we do that is, since we want to rotate the svg which is in the footer, I'll go in the svg and I'll first of all write transform rotate, and we'll see if this works or not. So if I write 135, for example, and this should have a unit. So you can see that it got rotated by 135 degrees. Okay, and so on. If I rotate it by 90 degrees, it will get rotated by 90 degrees, and it actually happens in the in the clockwise direction. The rotation happens in the clockwise direction. So this actually tells me that we can actually use the direction value directly, because we assume that the direction would be a degree value, right? So instead of passing this dir number, we can pass the direction value to the component, and that will give us a more gradual rotation. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So this time around I've passed the direction to the wind card component. Okay, so coming to the top, I'll actually just close this because this is coming in the way. So over here, we can then use this particular value. So how we use it is by using this syntax. We write dollar curly braces, okay? And inside this we can, okay, hold on. So this is not working for some reason. Yeah, so we write it like this. We write dollar curly braces for any particular value, and then we can extract that particular property using this syntax. So we write props and then give an arrow, and we write this should actually be inside the rotate function, right? So we put it inside a string like this, rotate, round brackets, and inside there we put that particular property. So props dot direction. Okay, this way the rotation will actually the rotate value will actually come from the props dot direction property. Okay, and at the end we need to put the unit. So this might seem a little confusing, but we can simplify it a bit. So instead of like basically you use this to extract any value from the property. Okay, from the props object. So instead of using it twice like I did here, what we can do is we can write rotate outside. Okay, and then for the and we can also write degree over here, and then for the value only we can use this whole syntax. So I'll just cut it and paste it inside. Now this might look a little weird and it is also not highlighting properly, but this will work. So I'll just remove all of this. So now this part will, or to be precise, this part will give me the value, and then this is the unit of that. This is the unit at the end. Okay, so this is basically JavaScript inside this whole CSS. All right. Also, I forgot to mention, you might not be getting all these syntax highlighting in your style component. This all must be showing up like a string for you, and that is because you need to install an extension for this, that is called style components, VS Code style components. So you can simply search for styled, and this is the first extension that comes up, and you can install it. So this will actually enable IntelliSense for your style components and also syntax highlighting. So once you do this, let's just hit save. And we haven't, I think we have sent a direction value from the starts, right? We have sent a direction of 135. Let's just see if that's coming or not. So yeah, the direction value is coming properly, and this thing is rotated by 135 degrees. But obviously it is being rotated in the wrong direction. So first of all, I'll fix that. So the way we fix that is simple. Instead of using direction like this, I'll put a minus at the start. So now it will rotate in the correct direction. But since the icon originally was at an angle of 45 degrees, right? Like it is already at an angle of 45 degrees. That is why it is showing up like this. But we need to like reset that value. So the way we can do it is by adding another transform property, and hopefully this should work. Let's see. I'm also trying this out for the first time, so let's see if it works or not. So I'll rotate it by 45 degrees in the clockwise direction, so it is now pointing at it should technically now point at the like 0 degree, but it didn't work. Okay, let's see how we can fix this.
Can we subtract it
All
from
right.
that rotate?
Sorry, like how?
I mean,
What do you
in
mean?
CSS, like rule of two, right? The second rule takes over the first one. So your
Yeah. So it's basically being overridden. I thought that they would be clubbed up. So the first rotation would be applied, and then the second rotation would be applied on top of it. But that didn't happen. The second rule is basically overriding the first one. So maybe
we can add it
we can
here.
do this. Yeah, maybe we can do this, and this would work. Let's just see if this works or not. Yeah, so this worked. So the transform property can actually take us infinite number of properties. So these can be scale or rotation values or anything, and they are executed one by one. So I first of all provided a transform of rotate, like I rotated it by 45 in the clockwise. So now it's at 0, and then I rotated it in the anti-clockwise direction by whatever degree I want it to rotate. So now it's pointing in the correct direction. So let's just see if we change it over in the stats section. Does it change on the web page or not? I'll set it to 180 and save, and yeah, it's changing. So now when we get this data from the API call, then in that case we if whenever we get this data for the wind speed from the API call, then in that case this angle would be exactly precise. All right. So, but we still created this whole dir thing, right? So let's just put it to use, and we have to like this will actually come to use when we like implement this string over here. So the way we do it is, so basically based on whatever value is present for like 0 to 7, we need to show a particular string, right? So I'm thinking arrays. So what we can do is we can create a constant array. So I'll call it direction names equals to, and this will basically represent each of the directions starting from east and in the anti-clockwise direction like we had over here. Okay, so I'll name them E, then it should be northeast, right? So that should be NE, then comes north, then comes northwest, then comes west, then it should be southwest, then comes south, and finally southeast. I think these are 8 values. Yeah, okay. So now what we can do is the dir basically stores an so basically acts like an index now, and these are the set of names. So in here, what we can do, we can write a simple JavaScript expression, that is direction names square brackets dir, and this will basically extract that particular name from this array. And since we have if we have written all the logic correctly, this should work properly. So currently the direction was 135 degrees, so that is northwest. So let's just see if it shows northwest or not, and it is showing that. So this is working properly. All right, so that is another card dealt with. Let's just move on to sunrise and sunset. So I think so after sunrise and sunset, I think the other three cards is are very identical. So those would be tackled in like 10 to 15 minutes. So let's just work on sunrise, the sunrise component. So I'll call it sunrise, sunset, or JSX. And again, this time I'll copy everything from minmax temp, paste it here, and remove everything that is unnecessary. That means everything except the H2. And in here as well, I'll just remove everything. And then in the stats, I'll use that particular component. So sunrise, and it is actually not showing it because we didn't change the names over here. So I'll first of all rename it to sunrise, sunset, and also I'll rename this card to sunrise. Okay, I'll name it sun times card. Okay, so after that, if I come over here, I'll be able to get this IntelliSense working. And then we instead of showing that the delay from that this UI basically is showing in the Figma, it's showing how much difference there is for the sunrise times compared to the yesterday's sunrise and sunset times. But I don't want to show that. I just want to show when the sunrise and sunset will happen for a particular day. So these should be these should be also sent as props. So for that, you name them start time, or we can name them sunrise, rise time, and set time. So rise time equals to, and this should be some value, and set time, and this should also be some value. For now, these can be simple strings. Later on, we'll see how to actually deal with time. So I'll just hard code these 5:42 p.m. Save. And then here we can extract them. So rise time and set time. Okay. All right. So then we can create that particular design. So the way we do it is, again, we'll have a div, and this div will actually have another div which will hold that arrow icon, and beside it we'll have a div which will hold the time. So this would be rise time. So I'm using curly braces for using JavaScript. And similarly, there would be set time. Let's work on the icons. So for the icons, uh, okay. So for the icons, again, I'll use React icons. Let's just see what all arrow options we have. I'll just search for arrow with 2 hearts this time. And let's just see which arrow we can use. I like this BS arrow down. Okay, I want to use the FI one. So it's FI arrow down, and similarly FI arrow up. So we'll import them from FI. So I'll write import FI arrow down and FI arrow up from React icons slash FI. All right. And then we can use them. So coming inside this div, I'll write FI arrow down. Actually, this one should be up because this is the rise time. And then in here it can be FI arrow down. Okay. And this is looking somewhat like this. Now let's start styling it. So the gradient circle that you see around the icon in the design, we can do basically create that using CSS. So that's what we're gonna do now. And these look very very monotonous. So I'll just assign these classes. So the class name that I want to assign is let's just see what we can name it. We can name it time wrapper, or I'll call it time container. Okay. Naming classes is the toughest thing for me. So okay, so inside here I'll do display flex and align items center and gap of 1 rem, because inside this container we have 2 items and between them I want a gap of 1 rem. Okay, and now for the first item, which is this div, this is basically the icon. I want to style that icon in a particular way. So I'll use a pseudo class for this. So I'll write div colon and I'll use first child. All right. Okay. And this will basically select the first div that is a child of this component time container. Okay. So let's see if this will actually work. So I'll just assign it a background color of red to see if it is selecting just the first child or not. And it is selecting that. So now let's start styling it. So first of all, I'll set a padding around it. So the padding should be of 0.5 rem. Okay. And also I'll give these two icons sizes. So size equals to, and the size should be 28. Okay, 24 should look better. Yeah, so the size should be 24, and this padding I can increase it to maybe 1 rem, and that will still not look too big, hopefully, or 0.75. And then inside here we can basically provide it a background image. Okay, so in order to provide like specify such a gradient like background, we use background image, and then we use a function that is radial gradient. Okay, and for radial gradient we can specify two different colors, and that will basically create a gradient starting from the first color and ending at the second color. So I'll select those two colors from this image. So the center color is FFDE31. I'll just copy it and I'll paste it here. And the second color is FFC564. Okay, so I'll copy it and I'll paste it. All right. So let's see how it's looking. So yeah, the gradient is now coming up on top of on the background. Let's just set the color for the cards as well. So in the SVG, the color should be white. Those cards are now white, and let's make it round. So border radius, and in order to make something round, you can use a border radius of 50%, or you can give it a very big pixel value. So I'll use 50%. And so this is not looking exactly round, and the reason behind that is because these boxes are not exactly a square. So in order to make them turn them into a square, we need to basically like hold on. All right, so yeah, so what we can do is we can set the height of this div to 48, since the width is already 48, and that will make it a square. So I'll set the height to 48 px, and now these are looking like a like what's in the design. All right. Now, since this was the first child, uh, no, that's not actually true. So now what I want a gap between these two basically. So for that, what we can use is for this time container, because there are two different time containers, right? So for this time container, we can specify the first child selector. All right. So we use this ampersand to refer to this class itself. Okay. So if you want to specify and add any pseudo selectors to this class itself, that is the parent class, then you use and. Okay. So and colon first child, that would select this whole thing, like this whole component, that is the time and the icon as well. And that for that I want a margin bottom of 1.5 rem maybe. Let's see. All right, this is not working for some reason. Okay, so let's just see if last child works or not. And instead of margin bottom, let's just use margin top. And yeah, that worked. So the reason I'm not sure about why this that the first child was not working. It could be because it's not actually present at the top of this whole article, but I'm really not sure, to be honest. So let's just use last child since this is working for us. So all we wanted was a gap, and we have it now. You can use any way you want to provide that gap. I'm just using this fancy pseudo selector for it. All right. So now it's looking like how I wish want it to look. All right. So now for the second div, which actually holds the time, I'll use div last child. Okay. And in here, I can specify font size of 18 pt. All right. Or maybe 16 pt, and then font weight of 600. And this is looking decent. All right, moving on to the last three cards, and these would be very easy to implement. So I'll just work on I'll just work on humidity and air quality first of all, and then lastly visibility, because that is very simple. So starting with humidity .jsx. Okay, this is actually taking a while, sorry about that. All right, so so I'm just doing this now, without explaining stuff, because this is getting very repetitive now. All right, so this should be called humidity, and I'm using humidity card over here, and then inside here I'll use div, and this should be a percentage value. So I'll just pass humidity as a prop, and this time I'm using lowercase, so it's a value, not a component. And inside here I'll write humidity and put a span space, and this is a percentage value, so I'll just put a percent at the end. All right, so with this I can style this div. So div font size 16, not 16, this should actually go as high as 32 pt. Let's see how it looks. So according to the styles, I think this should be equivalent to the wind status size. So I'll just see what I specified over there, and that was 40 pt, right? So I'll just use that for humidity as well. So I'll paste it, and I haven't used that in the stats, so I'll just paste it, write it over here. So humidity, the humidity value equals to 12%. Okay. So and it's giving me an error. Let's see what this is related to. No such file or directory open. Okay. So I'm importing humidity, and this is called humidity as well. And then inside humidity, I'm exporting humidity properly, and this is the humidity card. Okay, I think CRA is acting up, so I'll just close it and npm start again. And also, anyways, whenever you get this kind of error that starts with a no end, then most probably CRA is acting up, and you just need to hit restart, and that will work. So now the humidity value is coming over here. But I did notice something, that I forgot to change the titles in the sunrise component as well. So I'll just do that. Sunrise and sunset. Save. For the humidity, I'll change it to humidity and hit save. All right. So now I'm also able to see the humidity. Okay. So for the span, I'll specify a font size of 12 pt. or maybe I'll use 16 pt because 12 is a little too small with respect to this. Okay, so yeah, so this looks good. So I won't be going into the level meter for now. Let's just try to finish with all the three card components, and then we can get into a little bit about React state and stuff that would make your page dynamic. So and then at the end, if we have the in a polishing phase, we can create that level element. Okay. So moving on to the visibility card. So I'll just create a visibility.jsx, and this would be identical to humidity one. So I'll just copy paste it and name it visibility. And at the top, I'll name it visibility card. All right. So after this, I'll change the title to visibility, and this should also be visibility because that's the property that I want to send, and that's what I'll use over here. Now the unit for visibility would be kilometer, so I'll just use that, and that's it for the visibility card. So I'll now you import that into the stats component. So this is named visibility. It's saved, and I'll send the visibility prop as well. So the visibility that I want to show is 2. Okay. All right. So, or I can send a float value if I want. Okay. So, a few things. If you want to enforce any kind of format, like you see for in case of wind status, there are 2 decimal points, and in case of visibility, there is 1 decimal point. You can do all of that using a JavaScript class called number format. So, if you search for number format on NDN, you'll find this intl.number format, and it basically has a lot of different localized number formats, and as well as you can create your own custom number formats. So if you get into this, if you read this whole thing, not the whole thing, somewhere around here you'll actually find how to do that, how to do the clamping thing. And I think there's also the toFixed function that is part of the float data type in JavaScript. So that also allows you to basically specify how many decimal places you want in your float values, so you can do that as well. But now, for now, I'll just leave it at this. Okay. uh, all right, so with this, I'll move on to the air quality part. So I'll name it air quality, and I'll copy this whole thing and paste it here. I'll rename everything air quality, and this should be called air quality air quality card. Okay. And with that, I can start renaming this air quality. It should be value, because air quality is usually measured in AQI, air quality index. So instead of value, we can use index here, and that is the index, or we can name it index value if this index is very confused. Like, this index is very confusing for me, so I'll just use index value here. So so this is how we can specify air quality. And at the very end, we see the very poor text, right? So for now, I'll just hard code this very poor, but later on we can change it based on the API that we are going to use. So for now, I'll just hard code it and write very poor. Okay. And we need to place it at the very bottom, so we do that by again using display flex, and this should be pretty familiar to you now by now. So flex action column, and then for the last div, that is a div colon last child, so I'll use ampersand colon last child. I want a margin top of auto. If you don't want to use all of these pseudo selectors, you can obviously specify a class or also add a semantic tag name if you want. So you can, instead of doing what I did at the top, you can use footer as well. So we can do it like this: footer and margin top auto, and that will push it to the very bottom. Obviously I've not used it again, so I'll do that now. So here I'll write air quality, and I'll pass the index value. So air quality indexes can, I think it starts from 1 to 10. So I'll just give it a value of 7 for now. So air quality is now showing up as 7. All right. For some reason now, so this basically the whole UI was supposed to be a 3 by 3 layout, but this is also fine. Although this looks a little cramped, so I'll go back into the stats component, and there we, so somewhere around here we defined the, the grid layout, right? So we haven't yet migrated all of this into the each of their components. So this is an exercise that I'll leave up to you. You can start using, since you have already installed style components, and now you can start extracting all of these styles, and separating all of these styles into their own components, and start using them in the components itself. So, and at the end what you'd be left with would be to almost clean app.css, except for the first style, which is actually a global style, so it should be here. But the rest of it would be almost all gone from here, because all of these styles would be, or each be in their own components. But for now I'll just use this. So in the stats we have the main we have this dot stats, right? So that's what we need to change now. So for this we used a value of 220 px, I mean 200 px, but I'll change it to 220, and that should basically enforce the 3 by 3 layout again, 3 by 2 layout again. So this is looking like all good for me now. So let's start adding some kind of interaction to our page now, because so far we have all only worked on static UIs and stuff, right? So the first thing that we can do is, again, the same thing that we did in vanilla JavaScript. So we can start by changing this New York US when we click on these buttons, okay? But this time we are doing it in React. So if you remember, yesterday we talked about how React handles all the render calls for you, and all we need to do is change the variables, and React will automatically pick the changes and show them on the screen, like it's doing right now whenever we are making changes on the development environment. It is automatically showing them up on the screen, right? So similarly, when you make changes to variables, and and if those variables are being used inside your components, then those components will automatically update, or more precisely re-render. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now. So let's move to the location selector component, because that's where we have the whole location selector, right? So again, what we'll do is we'll create a const array, and this should be a locations array, or I'll call it something more precise, and that is preferred locations. Okay, and this will contain New York US, then it will contain Chennai TN, and similarly let's just name a few more: Kolkata WB, and Delhi India. Okay, and you can name more if you want, but this is just a dummy data that we are going to use, and this is what we're working with right now. Okay, so starting with the first thing, if you remember in vanilla JavaScript, actually, you know what, I'll just open it as well. So I'll go to my desktop, and I'll open the JavaScript file that we worked on. So if you remember, we started by getting a reference to the buttons, then we attached an event listener to those buttons, and then we specified functions for those event listeners, and inside there we wrote our business logic, right? So instead of doing this, and then we also called the render function after we updated the variables, right? So instead of doing this, what we can do is we can React basically provides you all the event listeners out of the box. All you need to do is access them via components. So if you go at any element, any default element, and you type on, you'll see all of these suggestions pop up. And all of these are basically events that are fired in vanilla JavaScript and which you can listen to using the add event listener function that we discussed. Okay. But instead of using add event listener, here all we need to do is specify what should happen on click or on change and so on and so forth. So what I want is that something should happen on click. So what I'll do is I'll write on click equals to, and now it expects something. So the thing that onClick expects is it expects a mouse event handler. Okay, so a handler basically means a function. So that's a function that I'm going to declare here. Okay, so this would be a function that will handle the click event for this button. Okay, that is the left button. So I'll write and so you can name your basically all of your handler functions in a specific way, and that is by by starting the name with handle. Okay, so this is obviously just a convention. You can name them anything you want, but you should name them like this, because then if your component size increases, you'll be able to identify easily which all functions are like event handlers. Okay, so I'll write handle left equals to, and this should be a function. Okay, and similarly there should be a handle right. So I'll write handle right, and this should be a function. So again, you can see React is making it easier for us to listen to event handlers and stuff, because this is something that people do very often in working with interactive websites. So this should be something that is easy to access. That's what React offers you, like an easy to use interface to attach event handlers to any element. So in on click, I'll specify that this is the function I want to run for the left button, and similarly for the right button, I'll do on click and handle right. Okay, hit save. Now inside here we can start working on it. So I'll first of all just log something. So I'll log left, and for this one I'll log right. Okay, so with this, if I open the console, all right, and I think at some places I've missed written class instead of class name. So these are all the warnings that you can fix. I'm not going to do that right now. So so if I click on this button, you'll see left log to the console, and if I click on this button, you'll see right log to the console. So the event handlers are working properly. Now we can write the actual logic. Okay, so what we need to do, again, just like we did in the script.js, we had an active location variable, and we were updating it inside the event handlers, right? So that's what we'll do here. I'll create an active location equals to 0 variable, and inside the left event handler, I'll do this thing, and this time around the array name is preferred location, so that's what I'm going to put here. Again, I'll copy this whole thing, and I'm going to put that over here. Okay, and hit save. And now at this place, so if you remember, what we were doing was, in the render function, we were manually putting that text in the proper place where we wanted the text to be, right? But in case of React, we have that like basically the authority to specify JavaScript variables inside the markup itself, right? So that totally removes the need to write code like this, like so to set the text at particular locations. So and then the render function that React DOM uses basically does all of the updations behind the scenes for us. So all I need to do is I need to write preferred locations active location. in the square bracket. And this should be in a curly braces because obviously this is a JavaScript variable. So, and if I hit save, this should come up over here. But if you notice, if I click on these buttons, nothing is happening. So what's going wrong? So let's see if so the first guess would be that the event handlers might not be working, right? So let's just see by writing a console log at what we are getting from the active location values. Okay. So in both the event handlers at the end, I'm logging the active location, and let's just see what we are getting now. So when I'm clicking it, the active location is indeed updating, but it is not showing up over here. Okay. So maybe this value, like this square bracket thing, is not getting the correct value, or maybe something is going wrong. So let's just hard code a value and see if that comes up or not. And yeah, that comes up as well. So the active location value here should actually update this whole thing, right? But it's not happening. So here's where things get a little tricky. All right. So React does handle the renders behind the scenes for us, but you need to tell React when it should do so. So basically, you need to tell React when data is actually changing, or to be precise, meaningful data is actually changing in your web page. Okay. So what I mean by this is that not all variables are meaningful, right? There are many sorts of variables in a JavaScript code piece of code. So even in this place, you'll see that there's handle left, there's handle right, and there's this where is it? Yeah, so there's this preferred location. So all of these are also variables. So should React re-render the page when handle left is created, or should it re-render when handle right is created? No, right? Even in cases where a for loop's I value, or like a for inside a for loop, a variable is changing, we don't want React to re-render in those cases, right? So that is why, in order to avoid these unnecessary re-renders, React wants you to tell it that yeah, you want a re-render to happen. So we do that by not saving our data in normal variables. Like whatever data is meaningful, we don't save it in normal variables. We save it in a special kind of variable that is specific to React, and that is called state. Okay. So let's just look at the React documentation to see what React state means. Okay. So not this page. Let's just go to this page. So let's just see if we can find a definition for React state. Okay, so they don't have a definition. Let's see if any other pages has it or not. Okay, so Google basically tells you that React components has a built-in state object. The state object is where you store property values that belong to the component. When the state object changes, the component re-renders. So the exactly what I said. So basically, whenever the state object changes, React knows that yeah, the component should re-render. So the definition of a state variable can be that it is a special kind of variable that React keeps an eye on, and whenever this variable changes, React re-renders the particular component, and it only re-renders that particular component which is using that state. Okay, so anywhere where the state is not being used, that component is not re-rendered. So again, this is also an optimization feature that React offers. So instead of using active location like this, like a variable, we'll have to create a state for it. So in order to create a state inside a component, order to add a state variable inside a component, we use something called use state. Okay, and you'll find more such similar functions like that start with the use keyword, and I'll get to what these are in a while, like after I explain what use state is. But let's just stick with it for now. Okay, so I'll need to import it from React because this is a React function. This is basically a function. So I'll need to import it from React, and this is a named import. So I'll put a comma after the default import, and I'll put a set of curly braces. Inside that, I'll write use state. Okay. Now I can put a set of round brackets, and this gives me the documentation for this function. So this returns a stateful value and a function to update it. So this returns two stuff. One is the stateful value, and second is a function that updates this value. Okay, and it also so use state also takes a value. So if you look at this, these are two different variants for it. So if you look at this variant, it is taking a value, and this value is basically the initial state or the initial value. Okay, so you're gonna hear this term a lot from now on, React state. So React state basically means any variable that can update a particular component. Okay, and you can also think of it like a React state represents the state of the whole component. Okay, so here for the active location, I'll use a default value of 0. Okay, I'll actually remove this now because I don't need it anymore. And now this was returning two things, right? First is a value which is of type number, because I've used a number as a default value, right, as the initial value. So it returns a value that is a state value of type number, and the second thing it returns is a function which can update that value. Okay, and this is returned as an array. Okay, so the first element of that array is the value, and the second element is the function. Okay, so the way we use these two is by destructuring the array. Yesterday we talked about object destructuring, which we have used in a lot of places, like here, right? This is object destructuring. This time around we are destructuring the where is it? Yeah, so this time around we are destructuring the array. So we do it like this: const, and we put a set of square brackets for destructuring arrays. Then so in arrays, each of the array elements don't have a specific name, right? They just have a position in the array. So we'll have to depend on the position itself. So the first position was the state value, right? So I'll name the first variable as state, and the second one was a function that sets this state. So I'll name it set state. Okay, now this holds a number that is 0, and I can update that by using set state and then setting the new value. Okay, this is a function. So I'll name it, I'll be more specific about my name. So I'll name it active location itself. And instead of set state, I'll call it set active location. Okay. Now, wherever I want to set the location to something, I'll actually call this set active location function. And by calling this function is how React knows that when to re-render a component. Okay. Whenever such a function is called, it basically re-renders a component. All right. So here I'll write set active location, and inside there I'll actually set the new active location. Okay, so this will actually happen after after we have done all of these calculations. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a active location minus minus, and if active location is less than 0, then I'm setting active location to preferred location dot length, right? But active location is a state, and states are constant. Like if you look at it, you'll see that this is a constant, right? So you cannot change it now. Like you cannot do a minus minus on this. So what we need to do is we need to create a temp variable, like a temporary variable. So I'll do const temp equals to active location, then I'll do a temp minus minus, and basically everywhere I'll replace this by temp. Okay, now at the end I can set it. So I'll do set active location temp, and with this, okay, this is actually giving me an error because I used const. This should be let, because these are changing at a later time, right? So now I'm setting that as the active location. Okay, similarly I'll repeat the same pattern in here. So I'll do let temp equals to active location. Okay, and then I'll do temp plus plus, and then I'll do active. If temp is greater than that value, then temp equals to 0. And finally I'll do here it should be temp, and this should be set active location. Okay, so with this, the state should now update, and whenever this state updates, this component re-renders, because this state is part of the location selector component. So this whole component re-renders, and this time around when it re-renders, it will update this text over here. So basically any kind of update will only happen when the component re-renders. That is why it was not showing up earlier, because it was the value was changing in the JavaScript side, but it was not rendering, so it was not coming on your HTML page. That's what was happening earlier. Now this is a state, so this should re-render. If I click next, it should change flawlessly. Okay. Now obviously I took the longer route to in order to explain you properly how state works. But if you look at the bigger picture here, you'll see how easy this is. Like, you just have a setter here, and whenever you set that particular state value, the component automatically re-renders, and wherever you have used that value, it automatically basically updates that text on the page itself. I can show this to you that it can update on multiple locations by copy pasting this a number of times. So it's coming up a number of times and it is looking ugly, obviously. But if I click this button, you'll see that it is updating at all of those places at once. Okay, so this is the this is the power of React, and this is the beauty of React, usage of state, basically. So there's so what we used here, like I told you that I'm going to get back to this now. So this anything that starts with use in React is actually called a hook. Okay, so what is a hook? So in order to explain this, I'll need to explain you what were class components. So before we had functional components, there were class components, right? And in class components, we used a very different pattern to store state. And basically every component in a class component was used to have a state. Either it was an empty state, or it had some variables, or it had some properties like this active location. So in class components, state was basically an object. That is what I meant by when I said state object. Okay, but in case of a functional component, we don't have objects that are related to that function, right? Because in classes we have we have methods and properties that belong to that class. That is why state was a property that belonged to that particular class component. But in case of functional component, we don't have that ability to define a property that is specific to this function. That is why in order to use things like state, or in order to fire side effects that happen when React basically re-renders this component, we use hooks. Okay, so a hook can be thought of like a hook is basically a function which hooks to your functional component and provides it basically with super abilities. Okay, so the very basic hook is use state hook. One of the very basic hooks is use state hook. There are many other hooks that React provides, and you can look at them if you type use over here. So there's use callback, use context, and use debug value. There's use effect. This is also another hook that is used very frequently, and we are going to use this later on when we are doing API calls. Then there's use memo, use reducer, and use ref. Some of the most important ones are use effect, use context, use callback, and use ref. These are the ones that I've used so far. So that's what that's what React hooks are. If you want to delve deeper into what React hooks are and you want to read about them, the best place to read about them is the documentation itself. So I think this should be it for today. Like this is the page, like for if you want to delve deeper into React hooks and you want to understand how each of them works. So you'll get to see each of the hooks in action, and you'll get to see what each of them does as well. But here's the use state hook, and here's the use effect hook, because these are the most commonly used ones. Okay, so I think this should be it for today, because we have already we are already done with the whole UI and everything. And the from tomorrow onwards, I think we can start with the we'll start properly with React hooks and making the whole UI functional. So the first thing that we'll start with is actually the let's just start with the search bar first of all, and then we'll work on this select unit selector component. And since we have already made this, so we have already one step closer to what we are going to cover tomorrow. And so I guess that's it from my side for today. So do you guys have any questions? You can feel free to ask them now.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, actually
Yeah.
two doubts. First one, suppose say like using use state right in one component. Will it
Mhm.
re-render only for that component?
Yeah, so how usestate works is wherever, like, if you've used usestate in this component, and this is a location selector component, right? So it will, whenever the state updates, it will re-render only this component and nothing outside of it. Okay. So coming back to the tree pattern that React follows. So React basically has a tree-like pattern, right? So let's just nest it a little bit more. So this is the tree like pattern that React follows. Okay. So if you've used it over here at this component, right, and this component has two child components, then when this state updates, it will basically re-render this whole branch. Okay. And nothing else, like just this whole branch. Okay. So the more the nesting, the more re-render, the more like, taxing on the processor the re-render is. So if there is a state over here on this component, so this is like this might be a component that is inside the app component, right? Because this is the app component. So if this has some state and that state changes, then this whole tree re-renders, like this whole branch re-renders. Okay. So that's how the re-renders happen. It's not like that only this component will re-render. Any of its children will also re-render along with it. Is that clear?
I'm really sorry, but just my internet's a bit off today. Can you like repeat from the part where it re-renders for that specific branch?
Yeah, all right. So as I was saying, like, basically, if you're using for example, if you're using use state at this particular component, right? So it has two different children components, right? So if this state changes, if the state over here changes, it will not only re-render this component, but also all of its children components. Okay. So it will basically re-render this whole branch. Okay.
Right.
Similarly, if there is a state value over here, I'll actually represent this by a green color. If there is a state value over here and that state value changes, then not only this component will re-render, but all of its children will also re-render. And this happens because this happens because a state can also affect all of its children, right? So you might have already, like, you guys might have already understood how the props work, like in case of React. So we send the props always in like from top to bottom. So our parent can send properties to a children to its children, and those children can send properties to their children. So that's the direction of flow of props in the top to bottom direction, right? So you can also send states as properties. Okay. So if I had some other component inside this component, inside the location selector component, then I can send this active location as a property down to that child component as well. Okay. So in that case, that child component should also update, right? Because it also has that property. That is why the whole branch re-renders, and it basically checks wherever that particular state is being used, it will re-render all of those. It will basically update all of those places.
Right. So it's, I mean, like a top-down approach only. Doesn't
Yeah,
update the
yeah,
parent.
it's like a top down approach, and that is also one of the benefit. Like this is actually an interview question. They ask you what's the difference between vanilla JavaScript and using React. So you can say that React offers you a top down approach to working with UI and working with interactivity in web pages, breaking down into multiple sub thoughts which may prove too taxing on the mind or inheritance from oops. Yeah. Okay, that's getting like that's getting a bit too intellectual, but yeah, that's true.
By the other one was for that levels element of that, right?
What? I cannot hear you properly, Kunal.
How about now? Where?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you
Right.
now.
So that levels element was there, right? Uh,
Levels.
yeah, that for air quality and humidity.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm-hmm.
For the what I was thinking that you create a div, give it like a height show obviously should be more than the width, so it looks like a long part. Give the border
Okay.
radius.
Mm-hmm.
Then for that div, I probably do a pseudo element after or before something,
Yeah.
and the height of that, I mean, give it absolute positioning with respect to that
Mm-hmm.
div, and the
Mm-hmm.
height of that div will be like that uh, uh,
A
temp,
percentage value.
yeah, percentage. So that template
Yeah.
literal you pass in there, and then
Yeah,
that
yeah,
will
exactly, exactly. That's how it will actually be made. So I didn't work with it right now because like we can do that in a polishing step. But yeah, that's how it will be made. So you'll basically you don't even need absolute positioning for it. You can have a div and you can have another blue colored div inside that div, and the blue colored div like the parent div can have a static height of some pixels, and the inner div can have a percentage height, so it will scale according to the parent's height.
right.
So that's how it will be made.
I mean, most of what we're doing depends on what the API returns, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the API, I was gonna introduce this at a later stage, but since we are already like a bit ahead of the timeline, so let's just fuck the timeline. So what the API that we are gonna use is Open Weather API. Okay, so if you look at openweathermap.org, and this is the whole like they actually give you an example of what all is possible with the API. They actually give you everything that is possible with the API. All right, but if you go into the API section, and I actually did see this earlier. So you can fetch the current weather data, and here I saw all the properties that it returns. Okay, so the UI that I made is based off of all the properties that is being returned.
Okay.
So you can see that we are getting a degree value over here that is less than 360. Then we are getting a speed in kilometers as well,
Right.
and so on and so forth. Right. So
Mm.
that's what it's based off of. So most of it would automatically be supported by the API that we're going to use later on. So we're going to delve into this like maybe tomorrow itself, because I mean we are done with the UI and everything. And once the search bar, and I mean the search bar also needs needs an API call. So I think we can start with the API integration from tomorrow itself.
Like
So let's see how it goes.
will be a key
Yeah.
up function, right? Calls the
Yeah.
for the
Like
search bar.
yeah. So for the search bar, we'll use another event handler that is on key down or on key, or we can also use on change. We'll actually use on change only. So basically, in the on change, we'll actually send the API call, and then we'll get the data and show it in a list form, and then from there the user can choose a location.
Right. Okay. Right. No.
Yeah.
We'll be covering the
So
asynchronous code again.
yeah, exactly. So we can look into all of that maybe tomorrow, or if you guys want a break for tomorrow, because tomorrow is a Sunday, so we can do that as well. What do you guys say? Like, it's totally up to you. Since the crowd is now a little smaller, so we can be flexible about the times.
Uh,
Could you please give us break for tomorrow?
Yeah, sure. I mean, even I need a break. It's a
yes,
Sunday, man. So yeah,
yes, sir.
obviously.
Then we can continue
Okay.
on Monday.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So does anyone have any other questions?
How do you get the courage to keep your camera on while taking the lectures?
I mean, like, just do. I've taken a few workshops in the past, so yeah, it just happens. Like, you should turn on your camera. I mean, it's just you guys, so it's fine.
Okay, no issue.
Yeah. I,
Yes, sir.
so if you if you don't have any other, I mean, I meant questions related to the session
Yes,
itself.
yes,
So if you don't have any other questions, so then we
yes,
can
yes.
drop
Not a
off.
problem. Thanks a lot, guys, and have a good night.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Bye bye.
Bye, bye.
Thank you, Bhaiya. Good night, Bhaiya.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye, Bhaiya.